Chapter 5 Gloom-Stained Paths. Oddmere woke both Illorn and Emilay before the day began. He readied their traveling supplies, granting them a share of food, and gave them an extra pan for cooking, should they need it. He said to them, "Awake! The sun is come to burn the night away, and so shall you leave this place, or be threatened by my blade or hand." Illorn arose fast and early. He knew they had overstayed their welcome, or, in the least, Emilay had. Anon the fat boy arose, tired and hungry, expecting to break his fast before his leave. Instead, he found naught but cold stones before him, rather than the usual boiling water and cut vegetables. Oddmere opened his cave and stepped without, fearless of the dark day. Quoth he, "Out from mine home! Out now!" The night afore, Emilay had further angered his uncle, proving himself that he was a far greater pest than anyone could have imagined. Illorn had thought he knew Oddmere's wrath with the previous instances of mischief, but nay, only after Emilay sneezed into Oddmere's soup did he truly learn. But Oddmere did not loathe Emilay. He only thought of him as a terrible and rather irksome pest that, as he put it, should be hung by his ankle over a wolf's den. With arms ready, Illorn and Emilay sauntered forth before the great wilds, with the dawning sun above them in a festooned display that brought warmth upon the green forest. The ground was damp, as was its wont, ornamented with dew and a smell that only lingers in the gin of a day. So beautiful was this morn that all angst left them. Even Oddmere allowed the serenity of Valenfall to cleanse him of his worry and anger. As Emilay stepped forward, the ground beneath his foot pressed into the earth, and crusts of bark and nuts cracked, softening his step. He turned forward, then backward. He looked forth and yon, then down at the ground and up into the ether, until finally meeting eyes with Oddmere, who stood by his cave. "Uncle," asked Emilay, "where do we go?" And so Oddmere was forced to lead them both. They knew not the way, and even if they had chanced upon the road, they knew not how to defend themselves should night come early. As one might have thought, Oddmere was not so cruel as to let them walk onward with little less than a guide. He knew the forests well, and they did not. That's not to say he found aught jovial on the journey. Rather, he bickered of it frequently and made one rule: should Emilay speak or lag behind, he would quit them and return home, and should Emilay touch him or even breathe on him, he would do the same and leave them for dead. Oddmere went so far as to make it clear that if Emilay even as much as made eye contact with him, he would throw a fit and display to them his true anger. However, it was clear to both Emilay and Illorn that he was likely bluffing. Regardless, Illorn accepted the terms of his guide and asked, then should he not be bound by rope and hoodwinked, too, with a choke to keep him dumb, like a prisoner or a wild beast? This was but a joke, though Oddmere thought it was a good idea nonetheless. They walked long, and they walked far. Ever so, as they went, Illorn saw that the sun had begun to western, as night was come. Though in his heart he fretted not the dying light, but rather the many miles he had fared, for it meant that his father had traveled onward without him. Perhaps father thought me dead or lost. Perhaps he cared not for me or my lagging friend. Father, why have you left me? The thoughts blossomed tears upon him, but he was fast to wipe them away so that Emilay would not notice. Distracted by his sorrow, he walked into Oddmere's back, and night fell upon the earth, though the uncle did not pay him heed. "We stop here as it grows cold," said he. "Illorn, pinch my tent, and fat boy, make me a fire. I will take first watch and be ready to rouse you two should aught approach us." Emilay spoke. "Already? But day still lives, and have I not hitherto forbade you? Do not speak, or I will leave you and your friend to die here in this hell. Now do as I bade." "But, uncle, Giborn tells us many times, do not spark fire or—" "Fie and damn you! I have lived long in these wild forests and possess greater ken of the matters than one who dwells indoors." "But, Uncle Odmir, you live in a cave. Is that not indoors?" Illorn therewith stepped betwixt them to calm Odmir's strengthening enmity, whose hands had begun to shake with anger. "Say no more, Emilay," shouted Illorn. The fat boy opened his mouth and was slapped across the cheek. He felt for a bruise and stared in shock before Illorn, who could not believe what he had just done. "Evil deed," shouted Emilay, and he began to sob, then cry, and like a hungry babe, he fell in a helpless swoon of tears. Illorn looked at his hand, rueing what he had done. "Emilay, forgive me." "Good, yes," said Odmir. "I would have liked him to stop, but I did not want him to mourn a petty slap such as that." And the following morrow they came, and they awoke early and continued onward. Odmir had taken the first watch as promised, and Illorn the second. Emilay did not take a turn, however, for he was not trusted, and therefore slept to his leisure. "Ah, yes, silence," said Odmir. "How glorious it is to saunter outdoors with naught to hear but nature's songs and lays. How I love the speak of young birds, the howl of air, and a cool breeze." Theretofore, the peace of which he spake was marred by Emilay's consistent questions, and mind you, his questions were not well, for he asked of silly things such as, "Why is grass green and heaven blue? What do rocks speak? And do they move?" Now, wishing not to make conversation with Emilay, Odmir would try his best to ignore him. However, doing so caused Emilay to only become more annoying. "Uncle, hey, uncle, uncle," Emilay blabbered. Odmir screamed, "Grass is green, for the gods will it to be, and the heavens blue, for it's an ocean that flows above the world. But nay, rocks not speak, and only in ancient stories did they move as men do, I think." Even Illorn, though he loved his friend, could do without Emilay speaking, for he spoke loud, and his voice was irksome and harsh. Nevertheless, their journey that day was well and without troubles, that is, until a secret storm came upon them that eclipsed the merry ether and sun. And as they entered a moor, a foul smell irked them gravely, causing them to thwart their pace. "Gods be well, boy, if this is your gas," said Odmir. It was not Emilay, and he did not appreciate the comment. What so, as they went onward, the smell grew greater and more potent. Soon it became unmistakable. This was the smell of death, and not just one death. Nay, it was the foul stench of a host of men. Now, upon his realizing this, Odmir again stopped his pace, holding out his arm and stopping both Emilay and Illorn. "Close your eyes," said he. "Do not open them." He knew the dead were there, though the great gases hid their bodies and soaked their blood. "Grab hold of mine arm if you must, but do not see, for grave smells mean grave sights. You are young and need not yet know of such dark things." In blind sight, Illorn walked with Emilay at his side. Verily, a silence accustomed by darkness is boisterous in many ways, for the mind whispers sounds that can only be heard under such circumstances. He heard his breath and the ground nether his step. He felt the gentle sway of air and hearkened to the sound of dancing grass. Afore in the forest nature was loud and made many sounds, but thence there was naught but a cold ambiance that sowed fear. As he walked, he tripped, and by accident let open his eyes and saw what reeked so terribly so. It was his company that had abandoned him, all dead, and still rotting onto the moor like waste for new things to grow. "Forgive me, son of Giborn, I should not have let thee fall." Oddmere closed his eyes. Again the dark silence came, and naught made sound waved the breeze and earth. There too was the snap of a banner which danced solemn in the air. A slain horse was before it, with its maw drooped open. Flies and other insects entered in great swarms, and left to other things. Illorn stood and slowly approached the animal. "May I open my eyes now?" asked Emilay. He was ignored. "This was my father's horse," answered Illorn. A small part of his adolescent mind expected the horde of slain men to rise up, as though they were only injured or playing a trick on him. But no, this was real. They were dead, and were never again going to stand up. The thought made him sad, though the idea of forever being asleep baffled him. He knelt down before the great steed and felt its horn, which was spattered in blood, though he dared not look into its eyes, for he knew they were already gone, rotten away, or eaten by whatever that had slain it. He stood and studied the lay of the land. Blood and feathers decorated their gloom-stained path, and the half-eaten faces of men clung to their expressions of anger and fear. "These are but 18 men," said Oddmere. "I do not see your father here." Illorn looked and saw that he was correct, or at least he hoped. "Think you my father fled?" asked he. "Perhaps he did, son of Giborn, or perhaps not. It's hard to tell. I first contemplated belying you with hearty hope, but that would be an error I would one day rue. Your father, blessed be his name, is likely dead." Emilay heard his words, and by the fear that therewith welled within him, he opened his eyes, seeing before him the carnage that was done, and gan to flail like frightened child, and cried as he fell to his knees and vomited. Blood, as he knew it, had always been depicted as red and thin, spattered upon the ground like soil, like spilled wine. But no, blood in this great volume was black, and it was thick like tar. "Fie you, Emilay," said Oddmere. He went to pick him up and tame him, but he stopped himself, for he knew there was naught to be done. "You mean my father's dead?" asked Illorn. His mien was that of stone, but time come Oddmere knew he would mourn and grieve loudly. "That, or eaten, or both. If he is not here, then there is but a chance he fled on foot, but I know thy father, son of him. He is a man bound in cuffs of pride and fettered by honor that would have led him to his death. Whether sooner or later I do not know, but perhaps sooner, as we see before us." Illorn's eyes began to redden and wet, but he checked his tears, as his father had always bade him to never cry before another man. Oddmere placed his hand on his shoulder. "You need not wall your sorrow, Illorn. Doing such a thing does not create a hard man. Rather, it makes an illusion of one, while his soul is hurt and in need of touch." Thereupon Illorn let loose tears in great grieving, and so too were Emilay's tears ushered in greater streams. They clung to each other and hugged the other, crying without care of whatso soul heard them. Oddmere searched and checked the slain bodies for their identities and possessions. None of them were the father of Illorn, and carried little of value among their person. However, their wagon, which was fallen to its side, contained food and blankets. Oddmere and Illorn carried what they could, though it was not much. Afterwards, as the morning star began to fall, they hid into the forest and set camp for supper. It was a cold night, though it did not snow or rain. None spoke or laughed or smiled. Not even night bugs cricketed or chirped. Even the fire seldom popped and gave off little warmth. It was as quiet as one could bear. In the silence of that darkness, the yonder bramble of the forest began to rattle and stir, and quickly they turned their heads towards that noise in fear of what it could be. "Hush," said Oddmere. "Might it be game or predator? Who comes here?" shouted he. Again the noise rattled in their ears. "Friend or foe?" again asked Oddmere. Naught responded. He stood. "I say you again, who comes here?" When nothing answered, he turned back with sweat upon his brow. He had little love for the night, and dark nights such as these he abhorred. 'Twas doe or hart, I know not, but therewith an arrow whistled past him, and again he turned to look into the darkness. He saw nothing, and hurried towards Illorn and Emilay, who had hid behind a felled tree. "Do not raise your head or your voice. Prepare your arms, if you have them," said Oddmere. His hands shook wildly, worse than Emilay's. He was afraid, though not willing to display it. "In the name of the matron, we yield. We are without arms, and have only fire and barren purses," he shouted. Illorn held his sword tightly within its grip. It was dull, but otherwise sharp enough to cut a man. "Then give us your fire, and give us your barren purses." "Then give us your fire, and give us your barren purses. Your life is safe, if you know these lands, but do not display to us your arms. If you do so, I will smite you with my dart," said an unfamiliar voice. "Then I shall rise," said Oddmere, "for I know the way to all places from here. My companions do not, so slay me, and you shall gain no wisdom." "Rise, then," said the bandit. Oddmere did so slowly, with his hands hoisted above his head. As he rose, he saw two men, one with a drawn bow, and the other with drawn sword. They were Ador and Bajor, though he did not know their names at the time. "Name thyself," said Ador. "I am Oddmere, son of Emilay. Please sit by my fire and eat from my meal, for I have plenty for kind men who need not ask." Ador began to sit, but Bajor kicked him in his back. "We need not ask, only take. Now unveil your friends, whoever they might be." Illorn let his sword fall and rose with Emilay, who was wet and frightened with tears and slime. "Name yourself," said Bajor. "I pray you, I mean you no harm. I am Illorn, the son of Giborn, and my friend here is High Emilay. I cannot remember the name of his father, fair people." "That one is a fat one, is he?" shouted Ador. He laughed, but was therewith kicked again and fell to the ground. "Illorn, is it?" "Aye, hear your brother." "This is the son of our thrall master," said Bajor. "He'd promised such coin for you, but your friend, I could eat him right now, I could, would I?" "He is the heir to the throne of Anwil, mind you," Illorn lied. "If thou wert smart, thou wouldst keep him whole." Illorn let his arms loll. "Is that though?" questioned Bajor. Omer gave Illorn a sly look. "Well, that could be why he is fat like a pig. The fatter, the richer, my father once told me. And such pleasant words you use. Has no one spake thus to me before?" "Illorn, you silly, I am not heir to any land," said Emilay. He seemed more irritated of Illorn's lie than frightened. Ador began to laugh hysterically. "Now is that so?" said Bajor. Illorn sighed. "Stupid one, is he? That is a healthy combination to be, truly. He must be a fun one to travel with." "Yes, he is fat, but only fat, said Oddmere. If you wish to eat him, then do so. A thin man such as yourself could do with his weight for a while. Bajor did not lighten the hold of his bow. Forby he stared at Oddmere gravely, preparing to slay him for his quick tongue. Amongst the risen tension, the seldom spoken fire betwixt them popped and danced light upon the sheen of their dirtied faces. You speak verily, Bajor laughed. He loosed his bow, and Oddmere let himself smile. No, if your troth is good, then you shall show us the way without this hellish place. I am Bajor, son of no father, and this is my brother Ador, son of no father. We were of Bofjorn kin, but now we are wild men. However, that does not mean we seek the shedding of blood. So was the first meeting of the two rebel brothers. But though greater in company, Illorn's path held greater darkness yet.